The night was cold, and the wind moved like a ghost through the broken walls of an old alien outpost. Kale, a lone human traveler, stepped carefully over fallen beams and scattered glass. His boots crunched on the rubble, and his hand stayed close to the knife on his belt. He had walked for many hours without food, without rest. Yet something in this place kept him moving. The ruins were silent, but not empty, and he could feel eyes in the shadows. The stars above gave no warmth, only sharp light, as if even the sky had abandoned this place. Kale stopped when he heard it. A sound so small he almost thought it was the wind. It was not the call of a beast, nor the rustle of stone. It was softer, weaker. It was the sound of a whimper, a voice too tired to cry. Kale froze, his heart beating faster, because he knew that sound. It was the sound of someone afraid, someone broken. He followed the noise, pushing aside pieces of metal and stone. The air smelled of ash and rust, and every step echoed too loudly. Then, under a shattered wall, he saw movement. A small figure curled into the dirt, covered only by scraps of cloth and dust. The figure shook, tiny shoulders trembling as if the air itself was too heavy. Kale stepped closer, slowly, not wanting to scare it. The figure looked up, and his breath caught. It was a girl, but not human. Her skin had a faint glow, pale and marked with bruises. Her eyes were large, shining softly in the dark, but full of fear. She was young, fragile, and she had nothing. Not clothes, not food, not even hope in her face. Kale saw her ribs under her thin skin, each bone showing her hunger. She tried to back away, but there was nowhere left to go, only walls of stone and shadow. He knelt down, pulling off his jacket, and held it out to her. The girl flinched, as if expecting a strike. Not kindness. Her lips moved, whispering broken words he could hardly understand. "I not worth. Leave me," she said, her voice weak and rough. Kale felt anger rise, not at her, but at the ones who had done this to her. What kind of people would throw away a child like broken glass? He laid the jacket gently over her shoulders, and for the first time she looked confused. Her small hands gripped the fabric, holding it close, like it was the only safe thing in the world. Kale spoke softly, his voice calm. "I won't hurt you," he said, though he was not sure she understood. Still, his tone made her freeze, then blink, her breathing slowing just a little. She looked at him with wide eyes, shining with both fear and something else. A question, maybe hope, though buried deep under sorrow. The wind outside howled, and the ruins creaked. Kale sat beside her, keeping his distance so she would not feel trapped. The silence was heavy, broken only by the girl's uneven breaths. She seemed too tired even to cry, as if the tears had already dried in her heart. Her small body shivered, not only from the cold, but from years of fear. She pressed her knees close to her chest, hiding as much of herself as she could. Kale saw scars on her arms, thin lines like cruel memories left on skin. Each mark told a story, and none of those stories were kind. He wanted to ask her name, but when he opened his mouth, he stopped. Something told him she had never been given one. Instead, he asked, "Who did this to you?" His voice harder now. The girl shook her head quickly, whispering again, "Please, don't send me back." Her eyes filled with sudden terror, and she clutched his jacket tighter. Kale frowned, realizing the truth. Someone had left her here to die, and those same people might come looking again. The fire of anger burned stronger in him, but the girl only saw a man sitting in the ruins, watching over her. To her, he was a stranger, maybe even a danger, yet he had covered her with warmth instead of chains. He had given her silence instead of shouting, and she did not know why. The night grew darker and Kale stayed. Every sound in the distance made the girl flinch, but his presence steadied her. Her eyes, once only sorrowful, now glanced at him with questions. Why had he not left? Why had he not hurt her? Kale leaned back against the broken wall, his hand resting near his knife. He knew the ruins were not safe, but looking at her fragile form wrapped in his jacket, he also knew he could not walk away. Not now, not ever. The girl closed her eyes, her body still shaking, but for the first time, she leaned slightly toward the warmth of another being. Her lips moved again, too soft to hear, but Kale thought it was a prayer, or maybe just a whisper of thanks. Above them the stars burned cold, but in that ruined place, a small light had begun to grow, and Kale knew one thing with certainty. This girl's story was not ending here. It was only beginning. The ruins were quiet, but Kale knew quiet did not mean safe. The small alien girl sat wrapped in his jacket, her body trembling with cold and fear. Her eyes followed every movement he made, as if one wrong gesture would bring her pain. Kale kept his hands slow, careful, like he was near a wounded animal. He wanted her to feel safe, but he also knew safety was a word she had forgotten long ago. The fire he built was small, just enough to keep away the biting wind. Its light touched the broken stones around them, making shadows crawl across the walls. The girl pressed herself into a corner, knees pulled close, arms wrapped tight. She did not eat, she did not sleep, she only watched. Every snap of wood in the fire made her flinch. Every gust of wind made her shiver deeper. Kale placed a piece of dried bread near her feet. He said nothing, did nothing, just waited. At first, she stared at it like it was a trick. Her hands shook, but she did not move. Her lips parted, whispering something so faint Kale almost missed it. "I don't deserve," she said, voice rough, broken. Kale frowned, leaning closer. "Everyone deserves food," he answered. But she only shook her head, her hair falling like a curtain across her face. Her words came again, fragile, trembling. "Not me, not me." Kale's chest grew heavy. He had seen many broken things in his life. Men crushed by war, women ruined by greed. But this was different. This was not just hunger. This was shame carved into her soul. He whispered, "Eat," his voice soft but firm. Her hand reached out slowly, fingers thin and scarred, and she touched the bread like it was made of glass. Then she pulled it close and took a small bite. Her eyes widened as if she could not believe the taste. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she ate, each swallow shaking her chest. Kale looked away, giving her the dignity she had been denied. Minutes passed, the bread gone, but the silence remained. The girl pressed her forehead to her knees, whispering again. Kale leaned closer, catching the fragments of her words. "Chains, always chains. I was too small, too weak. They said I had no worth." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hands to her ears, as if hearing cruel voices still echoing in her mind. Kale reached out slowly, resting his hand near her, but not touching. "You're free now," he said. But even he knew freedom was not so simple. The girl shook her head. "No one free, not me." Kale studied her. Her back bore faint marks of old wounds, scars shaped like whips. Her wrists were raw, even though no shackles clung to them now. Invisible chains held her tighter than metal ever could. He wanted to ask more, but every question risked breaking her further. So he waited, patient as stone, letting her speak when she was ready. After a long silence, her voice came again. "They sold me," she whispered, each word heavy like a stone. "They laughed when no one wanted me. Said even slaves better than me." Kale's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. The firelight flickered across his face, showing the storm behind his calm. No one, not even the smallest life, deserved that fate. The girl lifted her eyes, shining with tears. "Please, don't send me back," she begged, her voice breaking. Her tiny hands clutched his jacket tighter, as if he was the last wall between her and the dark. Kale felt something stir deep inside. He had promised himself long ago never to carry burdens that weren't his. But looking at her, he knew he could not walk away. The galaxy might call her worthless, but he would not. "You are safe," he said, each word slow and certain. Her lip trembled, her head shaking as if she could not believe. But his voice carried a strength that made her pause. For the first time, she looked at him without pure fear. There was still doubt, still sorrow, but behind her wide eyes flickered a spark that had almost gone out forever. The wind outside howled like a warning. Kale's instincts told him danger was not far. But here, in the ruins, time felt fragile. He had found a girl with no clothes, no hope, no name. Now she sat before him, whispering her broken past. And Kale knew this was only the beginning of a longer road. The fire burned low. The girl's eyes closed for moments at a time, exhaustion finally pulling her down. Her body leaned sideways, and before she could fall, Kale moved closer. He let her rest against his arm, careful not to startle her. She did not wake, only breathed softly, a sound like a wounded bird at peace for the first time. Kale looked at her face, young and fragile, and he whispered to himself, "Chains break, one by one." Outside, footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, too many to be the wind. Kale's hand slid to his knife, his eyes narrowing. Someone else was out there, and they were coming closer. The fire burned low, shadows long across the ruins. Kale sat still, his knife resting at his side, but his eyes never leaving the girl. She leaned against the wall, wrapped in his jacket, her small body trembling even in sleep. Every now and then she would twitch, whispering words too soft to hear, as if her dreams carried the same chains her body once knew. Kale sighed, pressing his hand to his forehead. He had not planned this, not planned to carry another soul through the dark. Yet leaving her here was not an option. He knew it in his bones. Her fragility was clear, but there was something else too, something beneath the dirt and scars, a strength hidden deep, waiting for the right spark. The sound of her breath grew uneven, and her eyes blinked open, wide and frightened. She looked around quickly, as if expecting to wake in chains again. Kale spoke softly, "It's all right, you're safe." Her eyes found him, but fear did not leave her face. Her stomach growled then, loud in the silence. She pressed her hands against it, ashamed, lowering her gaze. Kale reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of dried meat. He placed it on a flat stone between them, not pushing it toward her, just letting it rest. She stared at it for a long time, unmoving, her lips parted, whispering, "For me." As if the words were impossible. Kale nodded. "For you?" His voice steady. Her hands shook as she reached out, fingers brushing the food but pulling back as if it might burn her. When she finally took it, she held it close like treasure. Then she bit into it, her eyes closing, and tears welled instantly. She ate slowly, each bite careful, each swallow heavy. Kale watched silently, his chest tight. This was not just hunger of the body. This was hunger of the soul. She had been denied even the smallest kindness for so long. Now a scrap of food felt like mercy from the stars. When she finished, she wiped her mouth quickly, ashamed of her need. She whispered, "Thank you." The words broken but clear. Kale gave a small nod, saying nothing more. He knew too many words might scare her away from the fragile trust forming between them. The girl pulled the jacket tighter around herself. Her glowing eyes, faint but beautiful, looked at the fire. After a long silence, she spoke again, her voice a trembling thread. "They called me nothing," she said. "They said even beasts had more worth." Kale's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice calm. "You are not nothing," he said firmly. The girl shook her head, her voice cracking. "I was too weak, too small. They laughed. They left me in the cold." Her hands curled into fists. Though weak, the gesture was filled with pain. Kale leaned closer, his eyes steady. "Listen," he said. "You survived what others would not. That does not make you weak. That makes you stronger than them." Her eyes widened, tears falling again. She pressed her hands over her face, whispering, "No one ever said that." Her shoulders shook, the sound of quiet sobs breaking the silence. Kale wanted to reach out, but he held back, letting her cry, letting the weight leave her chest. Minutes passed, the fire crackling softly. Finally she lowered her hands, eyes red, but her breathing calmer. She looked at him with something new, not trust yet, but curiosity. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. "Why help me?" Kale thought for a moment, then answered simply, "Because someone should have long ago." The words hung in the air, heavy and true. The girl blinked, then lowered her gaze, clutching the jacket as if it was proof he meant it. The ruins creaked in the wind, and Kale's ears caught something else. Faint movement beyond the walls. He stiffened, his hand sliding to his knife again. The girl noticed, her eyes filling with sudden terror. "They come," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her body curled smaller, as if trying to vanish into the shadows. Kale's eyes narrowed, scanning the dark. "Who?" he asked, his tone sharp but low. She shook her head quickly. "Hunters. They always find. They always take back." Kale's chest filled with fire. If they were coming, then they were the ones who had left her here to starve. The thought of handing her back was unthinkable. He rose slowly, his figure tall in the firelight, his cloak shifting around him. The girl reached out, her tiny hand clutching his sleeve desperately. Her eyes begged without words, begged him not to leave her, not to give her away. Kale placed his other hand gently over hers, steady and sure. "I won't," he said, voice like iron. The girl froze, her breath caught in her throat. For the first time, his words seemed to reach her heart. A faint spark of belief flickered in her glowing eyes, the kind of spark that could one day grow into trust. But outside, the shadows moved closer, voices rising faintly in the night. Harsh, cruel, mocking sounds. Kale's grip tightened on his knife, his eyes burning. The firelight danced across his face, showing not fear, but defiance. The girl hid behind him, clutching his jacket around her body, trembling but holding on. The silent hunger of her body had been eased, but now another hunger rose, the hunger for safety, for belonging, for someone to fight for her. Kale stood ready, knowing the battle for that had only begun. The night air grew colder, carrying voices that did not belong to the wind. Kale's eyes narrowed, his hand gripping the knife at his belt. The girl pressed herself behind him, her small body shaking as if each sound was a whip across her skin. Her glowing eyes flicked left and right, searching for escape, but there was nowhere to run. The ruins that had hidden her now felt like a trap, walls closing in. The voices grew louder, harsh laughter mixed with guttural alien speech. Kale caught fragments of words, cruel names, and one phrase repeated, "The worthless one." The girl whimpered at the sound, covering her ears, her face pale with terror. She whispered, "They come. They take me, always chains." Kale crouched slightly, placing a steady hand near her shoulder but not touching. "Not this time," he said firmly, his voice like stone. Footsteps crunched over the rubble, and then figures appeared in the firelight. Tall, armored hunters, their eyes glowing red in the dark. They carried long staffs tipped with cruel hooks, weapons meant for capture, not for mercy. Their mouths curled into mocking grins when they saw her. One sneered, "Look at that, the little scrap still lives." Another laughed, "And dressed in a human's rag, how pitiful." The girl clutched Kale's jacket tighter, her breath short, her small frame trembling. Her lips moved, whispering, "Please, don't give me back." Kale rose to his full height, cloak falling around him. His eyes burned, and his voice was low but sharp. "She belongs to me now," he said, each word carrying weight. The hunters burst into laughter, their voices echoing in the ruins. "A human," one mocked, claiming trash no one else wanted. Another spat on the ground. "Keep her if you like, human, but the law is ours. What is broken returns to us." Kale's jaw tightened, his muscles tensed. He stood like a wall before the girl, shielding her from their gaze. "She is not broken," he said. "She is mine, and no one takes her." The laughter stopped, replaced by a dark silence. The hunter's eyes narrowed, their grins twisting into something colder. "You challenge us, human?" one growled, lifting his staff. Kale drew his knife, the blade catching the firelight. The girl gasped, clutching his cloak, torn between fear for herself and fear for him. She whispered, "They will kill you. They always win." Kale glanced down at her, his eyes calm. "Not tonight," he said. The first hunter lunged, his staff swinging. Kale moved quick, sidestepping and slashing, the blade cutting deep into the alien's arm. The hunter howled in rage, stumbling back. Another charged, but Kale met him head-on, knife flashing, cloak whipping in the wind. The clash of steel and staff echoed through the ruins, sparks flying. The girl covered her ears, tears streaming, every shout and strike dragging her back into old nightmares. Kale fought with fury, each movement sharp and precise. He was only one man, but his will was iron. For every strike they threw, he answered. For every cruel laugh, he silenced it with steel. The hunters underestimated him, thinking humans weak. But Kale's strength was carved from battles they could not imagine. And tonight, his rage was not for himself, but for the girl cowering behind him. Still, the fight was not easy. A staff cracked against his shoulder, sending pain down his arm. Another cut grazed his side, blood staining his shirt. He gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. The girl cried out, "Stop! Please stop!" her voice breaking. But Kale only shouted back, "Stay behind me." His voice firm as stone. At last, Kale drove his knife into the ground between them and the girl. His chest heaved, his eyes blazing. "You will not touch her," he said, voice low and deadly. The hunters hesitated, their mocking gone, replaced with wary anger. One spat, "You will regret this, human. She is nothing, and you will fall with her." Kale stepped forward, blood dripping but his stance unbroken. "She is not nothing," he growled. "She is worth more than any of you." The hunters snarled but began to retreat. Their eyes promised vengeance. Their words hissed of return. But for now, they slipped back into the shadows, leaving Kale and the girl alone with the fire. Kale dropped to one knee, gripping his side, his breath heavy. The girl rushed forward, small hands trembling as she touched his cloak. Her eyes were wide, filled with shock and confusion. You fought for me?" she whispered, disbelief in every word. Kale looked at her, his face pale from blood loss. "I told you," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You are mine now." The girl's lip trembled, her eyes brimming with tears. No one had ever claimed her. No one had ever stood between her and the chains. She leaned against him, clutching his arm. Her small body still shook, but this time not from fear alone. For the first time, she felt the weight of chains slipping away. The fire crackled softly, the night stretching on. Kale's wounds ached, but he did not move from her side. The girl whispered again, "They will come back." Her voice low. Kale's eyes hardened, his grip on the knife firm. "Let them," he said. "They'll find me waiting." The ruins stood silent again, but the echo of the battle lingered. And in the shadows, the girl's sorrowful story had begun to change. For now she was not alone, and her chains, though heavy, had met a human's defiance. The fire burned low, its weak light flickering across the ruins. Kale sat against the broken wall, his side bleeding where the hunter's staff had struck. The girl knelt beside him, her small hands trembling as they pressed against his cloak. Her glowing eyes shone with panic. Yet beneath the fear was something new, something fragile, hope. She whispered, Why fight for me?" Her voice broken, Kale lifted his head, his jaw tight, his eyes fierce even in pain. "Because no one else would," he answered, his voice rough but steady. The girl bit her lip, her tears falling. Her people had mocked her, beaten her, abandoned her. No one had ever lifted a hand to protect her. And now, a human stranger had bled for her, had stood against hunters who called her worthless. Her heart ached with a feeling she could not name, a mix of disbelief, fear, and something that felt warm and terrifying all at once. The ruins creaked in the cold wind, and Kale's sharp ears caught it again. Footsteps, faint but steady, circling like wolves. The hunters had not left. They were waiting, watching, testing his strength. Kale forced himself to stand, his breath heavy but his stance unshaken. The girl tried to hold him down, whispering, "Please, you're hurt. They'll kill you." Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "They'll have to try," he said, his voice low like thunder. Moments later, the hunters stepped into the firelight once more, their grins wider now, their weapons raised. The leader sneered, "Look at the human, bleeding but still pretending to be strong." Another added, "Give us the scrap and we'll let you crawl away." The girl's breath caught, her small fingers digging into Kale's cloak. She pressed herself against his back, trembling, waiting for betrayal. But Kale stepped forward instead, pulling her behind him, his knife gleaming in the firelight. "She stays with me," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut the night. The hunters laughed, circling, their eyes glowing red. "You claim her as yours," the leader mocked. "Then die with her." They lunged, their staffs whistling through the air. Kale met them head-on, his knife flashing, his body moving with practiced precision. Pain surged through him with every strike, but his rage burned hotter than the wound. Every slash was fueled by defiance, every block by the promise he had made to the girl. The clash was brutal, the sound of steel against staff echoing across the ruins. The girl covered her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Each blow Kale took felt like it struck her too, yet she could not look away. Her wide eyes followed him, her heart pounding with every step. She saw the way he stood, tall and unbroken. She saw the way he shielded her, never letting the hunters near. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her above their own safety. Kale drove his blade deep into one hunter's arm, forcing him back with a roar. Another swung low, cracking against Kale's leg. But he did not fall. Instead, he grabbed the staff with his free hand, twisting it until bones snapped. The hunter screamed, collapsing. Kale's chest heaved, sweat and blood mixing on his face. Yet his eyes remained bright, filled with fire. The hunters had numbers, but Kale had something stronger. He had a reason to fight, a reason beyond himself. The leader stepped forward now, his grin fading into a snarl. "You're a fool, human," he growled. "She is nothing. You waste your blood on trash." Kale lifted his knife, pointing it at him. "She is not trash," he spat. "She is mine, and I will burn the stars before I let you take her." The words rang through the ruins, carried by fury and truth. The girl gasped, her chest tight, her tears blurred her vision. But in her heart, something cracked open. For the first time, someone had said she was not worthless, not broken, not nothing. Her breath came fast, and she pressed her hands over her heart as if to hold the moment inside her. The leader charged, swinging with deadly force. Kale blocked, the clash sending pain through his arms. They fought fiercely, blade against staff, strength against will. The girl watched in silence, her fear twisting into something else. Every strike Kale made, every step he took, she felt her chains breaking piece by piece. At last, with a final roar, Kale slashed across the leader's chest. The hunter staggered back, blood pouring, his eyes wide with shock. "You will regret this," he hissed, retreating with the others into the shadows once more. Their footsteps faded into the night, leaving only silence. Kale dropped to one knee, his knife clattering to the ground. The girl rushed to him, her small hands frantic as they touched his arm, his chest, his wound. Her voice shook. You'll die because of me." Kale lifted his head, his eyes locking on hers. No, he said, his breath heavy. I live because of you. Her lips parted, her glowing eyes wide. She could not understand it, yet she felt the truth in his words. For the first time in her sorrowful story, she was not a burden. She was the reason. The fire crackled softly, the ruins quiet once again. The girl leaned close, tears falling onto his cloak. Her small voice whispered, "Please, don't leave me." Kale, bleeding and tired, placed his hand gently over hers. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice firm even in weakness. The girl closed her eyes, clutching his hand as tightly as she could. The night around them was filled with danger. But inside the circle of firelight, something stronger had begun. A bond forged in blood and defiance. A bond the hunters could not break. The night stretched on, cold and heavy. Kale sat near the fading fire, his body aching from wounds, his breath shallow but steady. The girl stayed beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on him as if she feared he would vanish if she looked away. Her hands trembled as she tried to press cloth against his side. Though she barely knew how, every time he winced, she whispered, "Sorry, sorry." As if she was the one who caused his pain, Kale reached up, catching her small wrist gently. "You don't need to be sorry," he said, his voice rough but calm. Her lips quivered, her gaze dropping to the dirt. She had spent her whole life apologizing for existing, apologizing for breathing. Now she did not know how to stop. The firelight painted their faces with soft gold, flickering over the ruins. Ash floated in the air, a reminder of battles past. Kale leaned against the wall, his knife still close at hand. The girl hugged her knees, her thin body wrapped tightly in his jacket. Silence filled the space between them, heavy but not empty. After a long time, Kale spoke, his voice low. "What is your name?" he asked. The girl blinked, confusion flashing in her glowing eyes. She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "I don't have one," she whispered, her voice so soft the fire almost swallowed it. Kale frowned, his chest tightening. "You mean they never gave you a name?" he asked. Her eyes lowered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No name," she said. "Only weak one. Scrap. Nothing." Kale clenched his fist, rage burning inside him. To strip someone of even a name was to erase their soul. But he looked at her again, fragile and trembling, and he would not let the galaxy erase her. He spoke softly but firmly. "Then let me give you one." The girl gasped, her eyes widening, her lips trembled. "Me," she whispered, disbelief in her tone. Kale nodded slowly, his eyes steady on hers. He thought for a moment, then said, "Lyra." The word rolled off his tongue like a song, gentle and strong. "It is a flower," he explained. "A flower that grows in the coldest places on Earth. Even where nothing else survives, still it blooms." The girl's breath caught, her glowing eyes glistening with tears. She repeated it softly, "Lyra." The sound of it broke something inside her, but in its place grew warmth she had never felt. She whispered again, stronger this time, "Lyra," and a small sob escaped her lips. Her hands pressed against her chest, clutching the name as if it might vanish. Kale gave a faint smile, tired but real. "Now you are not nothing," he said. "You are Lyra." The girl's tears flowed freely, her shoulders shaking. For so long she had been called worthless, broken, unwanted. Now a single word had given her something no one had ever allowed her. Identity. She crawled closer, her small hands gripping his sleeve, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, the words spilling out like a prayer. Kale placed his hand gently over her head, his fingers brushing her tangled hair. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Just live, Lyra, live." The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the night. The ruins around them still whispered of danger. But for a moment, there was peace. Lyra leaned against Kale's arm, her body still thin and weak, but her spirit carrying a new spark. She whispered her name again, as if to test its truth. Lyra. Each time she said it, she believed a little more. Kale closed his eyes for a moment, letting exhaustion pull at him, but he stayed awake, watching the shadows, listening for footsteps. The quiet did not last long. From beyond the ruins came the distant sound of engines, low and menacing. Kale's eyes snapped open, his body tensing despite the pain. He looked toward the horizon, where faint red lights flickered in the dark. Hunters, more of them, returning to claim what they believed was theirs. Lyra felt his body stiffen and followed his gaze, her eyes widening with dread. "They come back," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her hands clutched his arm desperately, her new name on her lips as if it would keep her safe. Kale placed his hand over hers, steady and unyielding. "They will always come back," he said. "But so will I." Lyra stared at him, confused by his certainty. She had only known people who left, people who abandoned her. But Kale's words struck deep, planting roots inside her heart. The man who gave her a name now promised her something more. Protection. The engines grew louder, the ground trembling under their weight. Kale stood, his knife in one hand, his cloak torn and bloodied. He looked down at Lyra, who clung to his jacket with wide, fearful eyes. "Stay close," he told her. "Your story is not ending here." Lyra nodded, though her body shook. Her new name gave her strength, even in the face of fear. And as the fire burned low, Kale stood ready once more. The hunters would return, but this time they would not face a nameless child. They would face Lyra, and the human who had chosen her. The night was quiet but heavy. The human and the tiny alien girl moved through the wet forest. The stars above broke through the clouds, their faint light guiding the path. Every step the man took was slow, his wounds aching, but he never stumbled. His eyes stayed sharp, alert for danger. The girl walked close beside him, her small hand gripping his cloak. She had never guided anyone before, never supported anyone before, but tonight she felt as if she was carrying half his strength. Her chest rose and fell with determination. She whispered softly, "Do you think they will stop chasing us?" The man shook his head, his voice deep and steady. "No, they will not stop. They are afraid. They think if they take you back, their lives will remain safe." Her silver eyes widened. "Lies?" He nodded. "They fear what you saw. They fear what you know now. If you tell others that humans are not monsters, their chains of fear will break." The girl's chest tightened. She had never thought her voice could matter, never thought her words could hold power. Yet this human was telling her she could shake the lies of her people. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I am small, I am weak. How could they fear me?" The human looked down at her, his tired eyes filled with something stronger than pain. Because truth, even from the smallest voice, can be louder than all their shouts. Her heart throbbed. She gripped his cloak tighter. Those words felt like fire inside her, a fire she had never carried before. They walked until the forest thinned, and in the distance, the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. The girl stopped, her silver eyes fixed on the rising sun. She whispered, "I have never seen a sunrise with someone before." The man followed her gaze, his voice softer now. "Then remember this one, for it is yours." She turned to him, her small hands trembling. Her words came out broken. "Why? Why give me things I never had? Why risk everything for me?" He knelt slowly, his wounds pulling at him, but his eyes never left hers. His voice was quiet but carried weight. "Because you are family now, and family means we carry each other, no matter the cost." Her throat closed with emotion. Tears filled her silver eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of belonging. She reached forward, her small arms wrapping around him as tightly as she could. Her voice cracked. "Then I will never leave you, never." The man's strong hand rested gently on her back. He said nothing more, but his silence was louder than words. For the first time, the girl felt safe, truly safe. She was no longer a burden, no longer a mistake. She was something she had never been before. Wanted, but peace lasted only a moment. From behind them, the sound of horns echoed through the trees. The hunters had found their trail again. Their shouts carried across the forest, angry, determined. The girl gasped, pulling back. "They are coming?" she whispered. Her voice shook. But then she looked at him, her protector, her family, and for the first time, she felt courage rise inside her. "We cannot run forever." The human stood, gripping his knife. His wounds slowed him, but his eyes burned with fire. "No, we cannot," he agreed. The girl's tiny hands clenched into fists. Her chest rose high with breath. She whispered, "Then I will stand with you." The man looked at her, a faint smile touching his tired face. "Then we will stand together." The hunters' shadows grew closer through the mist. Their armored forms moved like a wall, but this time, the girl did not cower. She stepped forward until she stood at the human's side, her silver eyes glowing against the dawn. The hunters froze for a moment, surprised to see her not running. Her voice rang out, trembling but loud. "He is not a monster. He saved me. He is my family." The words struck the air like a blade. The hunters snarled. "You are poisoned. You are blind. He tricked you." But she shook her head, her voice stronger now. "No, you lied. You wanted me gone. You wanted me to believe I was worthless. But he gave me worth." She lifted her chin high. "I choose him." The hunters gripped their spears tighter, rage burning in their eyes. The human stepped forward, his knife raised, his voice was steel. "Then you will have to go through me." The standoff hung in the air. The dawn light spread across the forest, and in that light, the girl felt no fear. She felt something greater. A bond forged not in blood, but in choice. The hunters hesitated. Their prey was no longer weak, no longer alone. They saw not just a tiny alien girl and a wounded human. They saw something they could not break. Trust. With curses, they retreated into the mist, their voices fading. But the promise of their return lingered. The battle was not finished. The man lowered his knife slowly, breathing hard. He looked at the girl. Her small face lifted to him, glowing with courage and tears. "You were brave," he said, his voice almost proud. She shook her head softly. "No, I was only standing where I belong." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "And that is enough." Together, they turned to the rising sun. The forest stretched before them, dangerous, uncertain, but no longer empty. She had once whispered, "Please don't consume me," believing humans were monsters. But now she walked beside one, hand in hand, and in her heart, she knew the truth. He was no monster. He was her protector, her family, her bond, and nothing in the galaxy could take that from her.